I'm Robert Bean, and this is Focus, Purpose and Leadership. I decided to create this podcast because in my 40-year career in the advertising, communications and brand strategy worlds, I've come to learn about the fundamental importance of clarity and purpose, or in my terms, the value of having a single organising principle, one that influences a business's culture, its products and services portfolio, and its reputation. In this series, I'll be chatting with CEOs and leaders who have put it into practice whilst developing their own successful businesses. In this episode, I talked to Robin Rowland OBE, previous CEO of Sushi for 19 years and non-exec director of Marston's PLC, Cafe Nero and Eathos in the Middle East. He's also operations partner at TriSpan, a restaurant-focused private equity business in London and New York. As you'll hear, he believes brilliance comes from chaos, and a business without an elevator pitch can't hope to succeed. I might start, Robin, with a natural place for me to start, which is, I remember when we first met and you were explaining to me that at Sushi you had opened, I've lost count actually, in the midst of time. The way I tell the story, it's more than 50 restaurants in a year, but that can't be possible. But it was dozens. And in the course of so doing, you were hiring lots of people and they were staying for much less, having trained them, they were staying for less time than they would otherwise ordinarily have done. And that was costing you X million pounds a year. And this was the problem as you laid it out. And I said, oh, I see. So perhaps you might need some sort of mechanism that helps you filter people coming in. And you said, yes. And then there was a pause and I could tell there was something more. And I said, well, go on then. And he said, oh, well, all right then, we're trying to sell the company. And I always thought it wouldn't be good under torture because it didn't take much to elicit that from him. He said, we're trying to sell the company. And I said, why might you want an exercise in brand definition when you're thinking about selling the company? And you said, famously, in my book, because I want to sell the estate with planning permission attached, which I just thought was the most brilliant and slightly odd way of looking at it, but in my view, brilliant. And I've repeated it to lots of people. Perhaps you might explain to me, when you were thinking of selling a business, why spending time and money on sharpening up its proposition was seen by you to be so helpful in that sale process.
The reality was we needed to basically address the people agenda. The business had grown very quickly. We were 25 sites in 2008, and we'd opened about 50 sites over 3 to 4 years, pretty quickly, but not just in the UK. And my biggest worry for me was we didn't have the team that had the belief or the understanding where we're going in the depth and numbers that we had in the early days. And I just want to make sure we have put an extraordinary base of people together who could actually grow the business and double the size of the estate. As a private equity business, we're always for sale. And it just worried me that somebody was going to say, oh, here comes year 5 of our investment cycle. Can we go for sale? And I just felt that's probably one of the areas we could do something about in a reasonable timely fashion. But you said this is probably going to take a year to 2 years to actually come off. And I felt it was a good investment, one that the team really did embrace. And it did pay dividends, but it took a lot more work than we'd first realised.
Well, perhaps we might come back to that because that's always the sort of sting in the tail. It's easy to sell it, harder to do. But if we go back then, you when did you first encounter Sushi then? I think you joined in 99, was it?
Yeah, I joined Simon when he had 2 restaurants in 99.
It was 2 restaurants, yeah.
We had a couple other sites about to go. We were about to open in Bluewater and I think in Finchley O2 Centre. And it was a very, as a wonderfully creative, chaotic time. But I worked in much larger companies, so I just watched this with amusement when I first met him and said, I know how to sort this out. But it's brilliant in terms of its conception, and its execution was pretty good. But for its time, it was just mind-blowing.
Completely mind-blowing. I mean, I remember it being this. I mean, nobody had ever seen anything like it. I mean, the food was one thing, but it was the execution and the delivery of it, wasn't it?
The Kaiten belt and the extraordinary kind of rock and roll atmosphere and the irreverent, amazing team members, and this extraordinary food just kept on coming.
When it was 2, Did you ever think, well, there might be a limit to this? Was it sort of 20 or 30 or 50, or was the idea we can go forever with this?
Well, I mean, if you cast your mind back, the only chain restaurants were at that time of Pizza Express, things like Beefeater. I mean, it was just tiny. Wagamama's had just got started, but none of us kind of knew what the universe
could take.
Yeah. And I didn't, and I'd worked for much larger companies, so it wasn't really all about that. For me, it was just about getting behind an extraordinary food offer that I thought probably was food of the future. And then people kept on asking when we wanted to raise money or borrow money, how big can this get? And really, you had to rewrite the book every 3 years because you never quite understood that.
I mean, it's an impossible question anyway, isn't it? But I understand. I take the point that the context at the time was it was unheard of. That there was no.
There's nothing like it. It's mind blowing. And Japanese food was incredibly expensive because it could be, not because it had to be. And we debunked all that, and we made what we thought was food that people were completely terrified to eat accessible and affordable. And it became very democratic and a hell of a lot of fun.
So you went in what capacity then?
I joined Simon as his business partner, but as his operations director. That didn't last more than about 6 weeks because he and I basically had to spend a bit of time with our bankers, who are Barclays, and they felt it's better if I sort of stepped into a sort of a director role as the CEO or MD. And Simon was completely agnostic about that. He wanted to do the creative. And he's brilliant at that. So basically, we kind of divided up the estate, and I became more of his business partner. I'd run 150 restaurants in my mid-30s, so 2 was a bit ridiculous. But it was a worthwhile place to start.
And he eventually backed out when?
Well, Simon and I agreed that I would buy the business off him in 2002, and it took us about 18 months to actually get a deal done that he was happy with. And that I could get the right kind of institutional money in, because I wanted to open 10 restaurants, pretty quickly. We couldn't have done that on our current resources. And private equity was having a bit of a tough time, the dot-com, so 2000, 2001. Everyone went a little bit quiet. So a bit of fluff went out of the window there. But we managed to get a very good backer on board, which is Primary Capital, and they backed us for 4.5 years from September 03. So that's when I bought the business, in September 03.
And that grew then to how many by the time you ended up leaving in 16, I think it was, is it?
Not quite, no. I went from, in 03 I think there were 10 restaurants. In 08, when we bought and sold the business again, there was 25. And then I went into a sale process as chairman in 2015 when we had about 75 to 80 restaurants. And then I had to come back as CEO for 2 years. So I sort of really finished in the end of 2017 and handed the business over to a gentleman called Richard Hodgson, who had run Pizza Express and was ex-Waitrose. And the reason he was better than me to take business to the next stage is we'd bought a supermarket business in Canada called Bento, which does extremely good, high-quality supermarket sushi and had kiosks in supermarkets. And that business has changed the whole nature of our trajectory going forward. We want to become global sushi providers.
Yes.
And that, who would have imagined that 20 years ago?
I was reading that's a $200 million business, the Bento business.
In total, the whole business is. No, that's Yo.
With the
Yo
purchase.
Restaurants and Bento.
Yeah, amazing. So if we go back then to the work that we did together, as I said, it was ostensibly to try and provide some sort of filtering mechanism for who we hire and how we hire, just so that we can get more people aligned to the Yo view of the world. That was ostensibly what it was.
And make sure the team understood what the business is about.
Internally, as you said.
There's two audiences. There was new guys, and then there was actually the existing team. What does Yo stand for, and what is our purpose in life?
And so when that was done, the as it were academic or the intellectual bit of that was done, and I sort of backed off because that's where I do. What happened then? I'm aware of the fact that the HR people sort of started trying to create programs and schemes whereby the whole of the company could get in on this and understand it. But when you said it was more long and painful than one might have thought, what was the pain?
Well, no. I'm doing it injustice. We had a lot of fun doing it because on the 2 days, the workshop we did with 35 people, identified two things. One was really about what our core values are, and they are still talked about by the management teams today. I'm delighted because obviously I've handed over the reins, but they still know that we stand for an organisation which is basically personifying RUC, and RUC stands for respectful, unconventional, colourful, and confident. And those 4 words we use in virtually every relationship we have with third-party suppliers, landlords, team members, board members. So that's endured and stood the test of time. And that's now basically proliferates all the literature in the company. So it takes a while to get this stuff into all that into lexicon of the company. Yeah. What has been more challenging was we tried to define the single defining purpose, and that bit was a bit unwieldy. It was a bit too long. I'll be honest, Robert. We could have got that down to a few less words.
Yes,
like just do it or something. But what it did do is it tried to capture the excitement of somebody for the first time going to Yo. Yeah. So that's been reworked a few times in terms of trying to get people who join from other companies to understand this is not a stuffy restaurant. Equally, we take our food seriously. It's almost an oxymoron. It's quite tricky to get that right with people.
Yes, it always was a balance, actually, from my perspective, between the focus being on the food compared with the experience.
Correct.
And in the end, I think the 51-49 argument, the experience ended up winning out, which is not to subjugate the food anywhere. It's just to say that the experience was so extraordinary, all the literal whistles, bells, colours, noises, all the rest of it. And I remember clearly, and you're right, it was unwieldy, the notion of wow at your fingertips. It doesn't easily trip off the tongue, but it does sort of capture the spirit of the experience.
Yes, it does, yeah. And the words we used, although 5 years ago it was, are now in all the documentation of the company. And the team who now run and lead the company still use the mantras which we came up with. And it had to be led by operations. So you had marketing basically with the catalyst for it, but you had to have HR. You had all 3 disciplines working together. And that, for a CEO, you have to really truly believe in this piece of work. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. But you have to coordinate all those 3 actually on getting on board.
Yeah, completely. I mean, particularly in an operations-led business like a restaurant is. I mean, it can't be without. Years ago, when I was younger doing this, I used to talk about needing to make sure that the marketing and the HR people would be united in this stuff, absolutely backed, endorsed, encouraged, bullied, pushed by the CEO, paid for by the CEO too, actually, more often than not, because it didn't come from anyone's budget. But in an operation like yours and many others, the operations people, because that is where the rubber hits the road, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, they set the mindset, and I think the great thing about the piece of work we did, it became very tribal. Other people have gone to other companies and have used the same words, but they don't work quite in the same way.
Well, that's very gratifying because, of course, they were crafted to be unique to Yo Sushi. The fact that one could, to think that one could transplant them somewhere else is, how should we say, naive.
Yeah, but that became more of us over time because we employ people from Nando's, Carluccio's, Wagamama's, you name it, or Pratt, and they all come with, they're all different tribes.
Do they bring their words?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, they do. And
So
you have to kind of beat them out on it sometimes and say that worked for that concept. It didn't work here.
Yeah, very good. So what? Looking back, then, what were the moments where you thought that you, as a management team, did things that really conveyed the spirit and the words to the people? Were there any events or moments that you can recall where it really worked?
Well, some of it's around the openings because we designed restaurants to be accentuate, wow at your fingertips. So they were more innovative and out there. I think all our sort of conferences reinforced it in terms of the excitement of working for a business that wasn't that conventional. We aren't in a boring, stale, middle-aged brand. We are a restaurant brand that's basically an evergreen, or it's I call it Peter Pan business. So if you go to our conferences, it's still, the average age is probably mid-20s. I mean, it's really young. I don't know how we managed to sustain that, but it is extraordinary. You don't have an old, cynical set of general managers. They're up for it. And the other things we've done is, I think, unlike other businesses, we've, in terms of made the food very important, the head chefs are genuinely listened to and are really, really involved with the food development. That's quite difficult to do at scale. And again, some of the larger companies, there's been so much change of leadership in the UK anyway, that the head chefs don't have any sense that they are valued, I suspect, by the senior team. That is not the case at Yo.
Well, I'd like to talk a bit in a bit about what's going on in the UK restaurant industry a bit, because we know largely the high street is on its arse. But before we get there, do you think there's a danger sometimes when you have this sort of, as we call it, unconventional, and all those other exciting words, colourful, but when we have this sort of free-spirited culture of a place, do you think there's a danger that by codifying it and putting brackets around it and making and institutionalising it, does it slow things down or does it do the opposite, accelerate things because we now have code?
Both are true. I mean, it rather depends. And what it does do, it places a great deal of onus on the operations managers who manage 10 to 15 restaurants on how do they use the codifying, the aspect of their job into the systems to actually deliver, consistency, but not get to the point where they basically strangle the enthusiasm or the entrepreneurial zeal out of a good general manager. Yeah. And I was very lucky. I worked for the school of Whitbread in the 80s and Graham Met, who were just extraordinary in terms of allowing me to go off and become an entrepreneur with a very, very big balance sheet. Here we don't quite have that luxury, and we are going through challenging times economically. But I think you'd be crazy if you didn't actually act local. These large brands who just become dumb brands are just have not listening to what's happening in the streets in Manchester or Leeds and being respectful. And you've got to get closer to the community, I think.
Are they hidebound? The phrase "freedom within a framework" has come up often in these conversations.
Yep.
I mean, it's just another way of talking about the codification we're talking about. Take Whitbread, for example. Did they have the framework, but were not paying enough respect to the freedom aspect? Is that what you're suggesting, or are you saying that a number of these other companies, if not Whitbread, might have their frameworks but aren't being local enough and providing freedom?
I was talking about the Whitbread and Graham Met of the 80s, which is 1,000 years ago. No, I mean, if you bring up to speed now, no, there are many companies who are run from the centre. They're run by the accounts team in terms of it's all financial in terms of the instructions given. Everything is looked at through the benefit of the mirror because it's all looking at past results. They don't have people who've actually grown businesses leading them. So you end up with a situation where everything is sort of almost like being micromanaged to the point where you don't see any daylight. And then all these paid-for advice from third parties, go and get, Bain & McKinsey to do a piece of research to tell you how to actually create a new restaurant chain. That's not how it works. Brilliance comes out of chaos.
That's
and I'm seeing it right now on a daily basis, and it is fascinating to watch. But you just have to pick out the good bits and then try and multiply it without screwing it up. And that is a very, very tricky thing to do.
Brilliance coming from chaos. Is this something you think when you look back you've learnt, or did you feel that at the time when you joined Yo, or possibly at a stage earlier than that?
Yeah, well, I did feel it, but I've had it before because I built a business called Old Leon in the late 80s, which I was allowed to go off and burn away through. And at age 28 to 32, I burnt my way through about 15 to 20 million of capital building these extraordinary restaurants.
Well done, Robin.
Which I'm really, really proud of. But I'm really proud of the fact we made 3-year paybacks. And actually returned the cash in spades. And it was a forerunner of Fridays. We were like, no one had written the rules book on how to do it. So,
and was it chaotic?
It was chaotic. Yeah. It was a lot of fun. We had a great American guru who came and worked with us to help us actually put the concepts together. The food was really important. We got stuff, extraordinary food out of Alabama, and went to New Orleans for ideas. But it just is inspired in what we were doing. And Yo's the same. We take a lot of references going back to Tokyo. You go there and you open your eyes and you can't fail to see some new stuff you can bring back. It's like the Wild West.
Wild
I would
East.
hate to be running a formulaic business. It's kind of not what rings my bells.
No, not at all. And of course, they're the ones that are struggling, aren't they? So perhaps let's talk about that for a bit. You put forward this notion that they are doing it by rote to curtail the point. As I understand it, the delivery and take home, delivery at home market is what's sort of causing them a lot of damage. What else is going on, do you think, that sees so many of these, as it were, middle of the road places now really struggle?
Well, it's quite well trailblazed, but you've got first of all delivery. A bit of a misnomer. It's on average in casual dining, it's 4.5% of turnover.
Right,
it is not suddenly the Antichrist that everyone thinks it is. It is heinously expensive to operate because you're paying a third-party aggregator for the privilege of delivering the food. So they'll take 25% straight off your margin. So it starts becoming, it's not a great marginal gain. And if it's incremental, not substitutional, it's not a problem. It's good to have a go at. And if you do it really well, then you probably get rewarded with some economies of scale. The fundamental issues are you had, I think, a lot of bright private equity money came in with smart business plans for growth, which basically forced the management team to go off and secure sites at a rate of knots without probably fully understanding the markets in which they were going into. So you had people who over-rented, over-capitalised because they probably had to keep upping the ante in terms of those fit-outs. So there was an expectation about the return that wasn't coming back. Then you had a situation where there's quite a lot of pressure on employment in the UK, particularly prevalent in London in terms of people are pretty transient at the moment, so quite difficult to operate. And then you had this ridiculous proliferation of marketing challenges because everybody's competing for the same market. If you're in pizza or pasta, you're in an absolute bloodbath, and there's just a race to the bottom in terms of price until you get enough traction on volume. So I just despair when I walk around a place like Newcastle, which I love, and thinking every brand's here, and I know I'm part of that, but at least we were there first. And what happened? A lot of companies said, I'm going to open 5-10 restaurants, whatever it is, a year. They tell the property director, they incentivize the property director to go and find the sites. Invariably, 1 in 10 is a turkey generally in our world. The trouble is, I think that number's gone up. And I think the landlords basically where the rents were being chased up, the capital costs were going up, and then the operating margins were coming down. And the last bit of the jigsaw is that Brexit fears have basically really sort of messed our economy up. The fact at 1.3 to the pound that was not where it was. 3 years ago it's 1.5. That makes a big difference on the import costs, and most of us buy our goods from overseas. So everything has gone against us. Rates, food costs, and then the property costs.
So in that sort of panoply of pain. I think what you're suggesting is most of that is the institutionally driven need to grow and produce financial results. Where in all that then is a lack of clarity of proposition as being a contributor to the problem? You did mention it, but what sort of proportion of the problem is that?
I think it becomes quite. I can't put a percentage against it. No, it's a bigger issue than perhaps we realise. What's your purpose? What is the purpose of Carluke shows today? It was very obvious to me 10 years ago. Wagamama's did a great job of redefining their purpose. There's no question they've come back on top.
Well, they're still at it, aren't they?
Still at it and doing a great job. What was the reason for being for McDonald's 15 years ago? It's bloody obvious now. They are absolutely brilliant at what they're doing. Or what was the purpose of Greggs? 10, 15 years ago, done an amazing job. And they've done it by reclarifying what the proposition is. So I think it is really important. And everything else should follow on. The investment cycle should follow that, and so should the leadership.
If we take that, what you've just said, and say, well, let's apply it to a really difficult child like, I don't know, you would know better than I would, who these middle-of-the-road brands are. Do you think if they were to sit down for a minute and recalibrate what their purpose and proposition, all the rest of it, clearly it would help, but are some of them beyond saving?
Okay, well, I'm not saying anything against them, but I think clearly Frankie and Benny's has lost its halo a little bit, and Prezzo has been challenged. That's two good examples, I think, which no one can deny. I think they could have, if they had really spent the time really understanding what is it that makes them different and special, and listening more both to their guests and to their teams, because I think they didn't listen enough to their teams. They probably would have worked out another route forward. You have to reinvent yourself.
Yes.
That's kind of what we've learned with Yo. And they've built the same restaurants. They deliver the same menu. They haven't changed the food offer very often. They haven't really marketed what the difference is, and the customers are just starting to vote with their feet because they're thinking this is just not happening for me any longer.
Yes, I had this with Gourmet Burger Kitchen actually. Actually a really interesting backstory they have, which has never really been brought to the fore, and it's a pity because when that conversation started, it was all about the commoditization of what is a standard thing called burgers. But actually they did have a different story, and I still live in hope that one day they will dig out the stuff we did together and perhaps do something with it.
Well, and the quality of their burgers is much better than people.
Much better.
I think there's a hidden story.
Yeah, there is a hidden story.
Great
There is,
business.
and as I say, we got to it, but it sort of then got lost in the
Change of ownership will change everything.
As you said earlier, that seems to happen so often that it leaves the head chefs spinning, but it leaves teams spinning just as much, doesn't it? And brands get very confused, don't
Correct,
they?
yeah.
But on this point then, Yo at the moment is where in that, if this reinvention is a sort of cycle, let's say, where is it now?
Well, it isn't. Obviously, I don't run the business, so I have to be really careful what I say, but I'm on the board. I'm a significant investor. I'm actually really, really delighted because the incoming CEO and the marketing team, particularly, and the operating team, have got their head around a Y2O in terms of reinventing the brand. There's a number of different directions they're going to take the business in the UK in the year ahead. I've seen them; they look fantastic. They are pretty. I can't be drawn on it because it's not fair.
Sure.
But they've been very creative in their approach. They've learnt a lot from the Canadian experience. This is a powerhouse in terms of knowledge about supermarket sushi. We've looked very closely at some of the global players to understand what Sushi Shop and Genki and Hana are doing. These might mean nothing to anybody in the UK, but these are mega sushi players, and we hope to bring that back both to the US market and to the UK. They will not stand still. Yo is going to go through the transformation, and it's weathered the storm financially brilliantly compared with its key competitors, Itsu and Wasabi, which I think are brilliant businesses in their own right. But one is a value play and one is a premium play. But they got really, really high rents, and
so
they're only in London.
In a situation like this, appreciating you're not an executive there, but in a situation like this, it's part of a reinvention, which is not just a reinvented proposition. It's sounds like a much more fundamental shift, and looking across the world for it,
and trying a number of experiments all at once.
Well, to what extent do you keep the, as it was, RUCC words as being the essential bit of the Yo-ism? How much does that feature when considering these alternatives? And
I heard Richard use RUC at a conference only a few weeks ago, and then the other one is Can I, which was Simon and I. Simon dreamt it out. It was constant and never-ending innovation. And Can I, once it's in your head, it's hard to get rid of. So you don't approach anything thinking, I can't do this.
Yeah.
So I think the spirit lives, and it's actually in reality as well coming through. But to be fair, it does take time, and Richard's done a great job settling in. But this is year 2, and we'll see some interesting changes coming up. Okay,
well, we'll look out for that. Moving ahead then, or to now, you're not sure if it's a poacher or a gamekeeper, but it's the other side of the fence, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Become an investor entrepreneur rather than entrepreneur. How much does this stuff, what I call the single organising principle, actually affect you when you're running the rule over a number of prospects, talking to the entrepreneurs, the operators? How much of that stuff makes your needle flick in terms of this being a better investment than the other?
It is important. I guess just a bit of background. I work for a business called TriSpan. I'm the operating partner for Europe. We raised $250 million last year, which is a hell of an education for me, how you do that. But we've done it. And we only invest in restaurants in this fund. That's the reason why it attracted me. And I can do what I like doing, which is actually giving advice and coaching on a more professional, long-term basis and hopefully make a bit of money out of it. But the reality is, for me, we're seeing between 80 and 100 pitches a year. That is a lot. And pay attention to the people who've managed to battle their way through to get us into our diary. Myself and the other partners will sit there, and you just know within 5 minutes because there's an elevator pitch, and this person has got to get out pretty quickly. Because if they can't get it out to us, they sure as hell can't get it out to the people who work for them, or to the landlords, or to their employees. And I try and make it as unnerving as I can for them, because I have done it myself on the other end. But we're talking to businesses. It's not venture capital. It's a growth capital. So they've already opened restaurants. They've probably got 5-10 restaurants. They're getting close to 2 million EBITDA. They're not idiots or they're not chancers or lucky people. They've actually got something about them. But for me, I want to know, can they articulate why this is a uniquely different proposition? And if they don't use the word people and food in the first few sentences, I'm probably turned off. I'm so quick. Everyone looks at me going, really, just come on, they'll get to the point, Robin. But honestly, I want to be excited. I want to go and eat their food. Yeah. And I just want to go and have some good time in their place.
Well, what about the
And actually, I need to like them as well, by the way.
As people.
Of course. I'm 58. I just can't be bothered now with people who are going to be who are so egocentric. They don't realise it's a team effort.
No, quite. So what about those with a hidden story, though? I mean, is there a concept, assuming you like the people enough...
or respect them, yeah.
Or respect, would you allow the elevator to get to the second floor before you start jumping up and down, if you think there's a hidden story in there that...
Yeah. I mean, our example, the one that we're doing about, we're backing this thing called Thunderbird, which is a street food. Well, I went low around all the street foods and saw this one long snaking line in two of the street foods, and it's to go and meet this extraordinary chicken. A guy called Matt Harris.
They don't lie, do they? Street food merchants they don't lie.
You know people.
You know, exactly. Yeah.
Because they're not expensive, so people can go to any one of 10 places.
Yeah, exactly.
And Matt just had the biggest queue, and he had a real vision about his food, and he understood his chicken and all that stuff, and we thought, right, well, this one, which unusually we're going to back as a bit of a rollout story. So we're opening in Brixton, Villiers Street, and O2 the next few months. So that's kind of exciting. But I kind of knew when I met him. The other businesses, I probably know the entrepreneur anyway, because I probably have. I wouldn't say necessarily my peer group, but I've known their reputation. I made it known to them that we'd be interested, and you tend to have a better relationship over time that way. But I have to believe that they can articulate their story. Yeah. Because so much of your job as a leader is doing that. And that's where the single organising principle does help.
Yeah.
And your book, I don't want to blow smoke at your bum, but really it's a book I give out quite often or spend money on Amazon
that'll
for.
Be
I'm the one or two people who get orders a month.
That'll be what puts turkey on the Bean family Christmas table then. It's Robin selling the books. I'm interested in this notion of the elevator pitch, because of course there's nothing new in that phrase, but I sometimes worry that it sort of demotes or downplays the value of this stuff. But it was made worse once when I was in a meeting with a very senior government minister, best left unsaid who he was, where he said, "Oh no, I understand what you do. It's bumper stickers," and I've never quite. I know.
Okay, that hurts. Okay.
Well, I don't. You see, I chose to think, don't mess with Texas and I heart NY and all the rest of it as being quite powerful bumper stickers, but it does deposition it somewhat. So you're saying the elevator pitch early on is really important for you to then engage and go, well, okay, let's see what's behind this and see if the rest of the business presumably stacks up to that pitch.
Yeah, I mean, simplistically, there's only 5 things that move in a restaurant world. It is around the product, it's around the people, the property, promotion, can you market it, and the profits. But if they come and tell me how brilliant their P&L is, I just say, that's great. You're looking in the wing mirror. I want to know where you're going, which is much more about the proposition.
Did you? So you'd mentioned proposition in that. Sorry, did you?
Proposition is the product.
Right.
I'm sort of crude. I'm not a marketer. I'm a humble operator. It's food and service and the ambience.
Yeah. The thing we do.
The thing we do.
Yeah.
And do it consistently, hopefully.
Well, I think we may have done, Robin. Can I thank you again for your boundless energy, forthright opinions, well-informed views, and time to come and do
Yes, you can thank me. But it's been a pleasure.
And keep buying the books. I'm so grateful.
Anytime, Robin. Thank you.
Thanks again, Robin. Please do subscribe to the podcast in your usual podcast app to get new episodes when they're released. If you have any comments or questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with me. It's robert@robertbeanbranding.com. Thanks for listening.